That's Benjamin Netanyahu making an international appeal for support, including to President Biden, who unfortunately laid the groundwork in so many ways for what we saw take place this weekend. David Harsanyi joins us now. He's a senior editor at The Federalist. He's also the author of Eurotrash, Why America Must Reject the Failed Ideas of a Dying Continent. Sir, good to have you with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Give me, first of all, your reaction to the events of this weekend and what we should be paying attention to here.
Well, I mean, it's heartbreaking, and as a Jew myself and person who's lived in Israel, I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around the savagery and barbarism of these people who did this. So that's my first thought. And my second thought is revenge, right? So I think that until we're talking about Hamas in the past tense, that the job will not be done. And Israel needs to make sure after this just catastrophic failure of security, which went on, that they finished the job. You just simply can't have a terrorist state next door, right? And then also, then there's a broader, the broader problem with Iran. And, my theory is that they never thought that this operation would be, quote unquote, this successful, you know what I mean? And it is now. And this would be a declaration of war by, if someone did this to us, we would consider that a declaration of war against us. So
yes.
Casus belli. So I don't know where that goes, but it's definitely a very dangerous situation.
It is a dangerous situation. We see the reporting out of the Wall Street Journal that Iran apparently was able to unify Hezbollah and Hamas in this joint attack. Hezbollah is now attacking from the north with missile strikes, as Hamas, actually had a manned incursion into Israel and took hostages. They say at least 130. Hamas is now promising to execute one by one these hostages in order to get Israeli defensive strikes to cease. It seems like Iran is taking a controlling stake of this whole thing.
I mean, an operation of that scale cannot be conducted by Hamas alone. It has to be, they need state sponsors like Iran. They wouldn't exist very much without Iran. I'm not saying they wouldn't have any missiles or anything like that, but they certainly wouldn't have the type of machinery and the type of weaponry that they do have. So it's clear that Iran was involved. The Wall Street Journal says they were involved. Hamas says they were involved. Iran celebrates this sort of thing. And if Hezbollah starts flying, it has like 100,000 missiles up there, then it becomes an incredibly dangerous situation for Israel. So
yes.
Yeah.
So how much has the Biden administration enabled this, and specifically as it relates to Iran?
Indirectly, quite a bit. I mean, everyone's talking about the $6 billion released, but when you really look at all the waivers over the last few years, it's more like 40 million or 50 billion. I'm sorry, not million dollars. Now, obviously, they're not earmarking those very same dollars to use in terrorism, but it certainly enriches them in a way to be able to fund all these proxies. Moreover, I think what we're not talking about enough is that Biden overturned, one of the first things he did was overturn Trump-era policy of not funding these groups, Fatah as well as Hamas. I mean, people forget Fatah still pays terrorists, the moderate Fatah faction in the West Bank still pays terrorists stipends, their family stipends when they kill Jews. I mean, this is just no other country would allow this sort of thing to go on with their citizens. And we have, we fund the UN, which funds these people as well. And all those dollars are fungible and they can be used for things like this.
Yeah, I feel bad for Benjamin Netanyahu to have to even say that he's grateful to Joe Biden, because he knows at the same time that Biden has been funding by way of the UN and certainly directly to Hamas and through Iran a lot of this, unfortunately.
Well, we did the Iran deal, which was a disaster, but really. And it gave Iran an umbrella of protection. People forget that once we were in a deal with them, Israel couldn't really do much.
Yes.
Then, guys like Rob Malley, who led that effort and who led Biden's effort, we learn, is surrounded by basically Iranian spies. I don't know how else to explain it, right? These
Rob
people,
Malley, for people who don't realize, he was the Iran envoy for the United States. He's the guy who was the top person to deal with Iran. And it turns out he was entirely compromised. He was doing the bidding of the Iranians?
well, I mean, he had three advisors who pledged to help the Islamic State secretly. And, one of them still in the Pentagon, and one of them couldn't get security clearance. Now, either he's a useful idiot, a fellow traveler, or, a traitor. Those are the three choices. And, does hardly anyone in the media even reports on this story.
And it got so bad. It got so bad
Yeah.
that even the Biden administration suspended his security clearance a couple months ago. And
Oh,
that
yeah,
news,
I forgot about that. Right.
and
right.
that news was broken by the Tehran Times, the Iranian state-controlled news outlet. No American outlet broke that news. It was broken in Tehran. And when it leads you to wonder, how did they get that news? If maybe they are very close to him and his people.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I just sometimes I imagine change the word, switch the word Russia instead of Iran in those stories, and Russia, and see how people would be reacting. I mean, then that would be the appropriate reaction for us to have now. This should be a massive story.
A massive story. So there's that. Of course, you also have the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I'm seeing reports now that that some of these weapons did end up in the hands of Hamas. Some of the $7.1 billion in weaponry we left behind, some of the small arms in the hands of Hamas, which is horrifying, not to mention that we have diminished stockpiles of ammunition that were meant to defend Israel in that region and sent it to Ukraine. So, I mean, how much worse could this get, actually?
I don't know. I mean, can have a regional war with Iran. That would be worse, I guess. And, I mean, again, maybe Iran wanted to do this because it wanted to undermine the Saudi-Israeli talks that were going on. I don't. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not that deeply.
That's what everyone's claiming. That's the conventional wisdom
yeah.
on this. They say that Iran led this because they're trying to undermine the Saudi-Israeli peace deal that might occur. But it's interesting that under the Trump administration, they were able to negotiate a number of these bilateral arrangements with Israel. Israel would link up with some Arab state. They would announce a new bilateral thing, and we didn't have this massive attack funded by Iran into Israel. But now with Biden as president, they feel like they've got the green light.
Well, that's part of it, yeah. And they're doing better financially. So those two things help. And there. I mean, look at how Biden's acted. I mean, everything he does projects weakness. Now, I'm not saying that I want the United States to go to war with Iran or anything like that.
Right.
But people understand what's really going on in the world. I mean, Israel doesn't need the United States to go to war with anyone. They can take care of themselves. I mean, I'm sure they need our help in funding and things like that, especially for the Iron Dome. But they need to be left alone to be able to do what they have to do. Most of the time, America, especially under Obama and Biden, probably have been, they inhibit Israel from doing what they need to do. But they simply can't afford it anymore. They're not going to survive.
What about oil production here? How much does that play a role? Because Iran's export, its primary export is oil, right? Energy. They were the 8th largest oil producer in the world last year. And Joe Biden has made it his mission to diminish American oil exports. That only enriches Iran, correct?
I mean, it does, especially if we keep giving them waivers to benefit us. Everyone says it's their money. No, it's not. I mean, sanctions exist to take money away from terror regimes. That is the point. It's no longer their money. It's only their money if we allow it to be. And I think we have every moral right to not let them, to restrict it and to force them to act like a normal nation would, but we don't.
Yes.
Listen, I mean, I think oil is a fungible commodity, so it's very difficult to play that game. But of course, it would be better if we did more drilling here and we had more oil here.
Yeah, and they're sending. I mean, Iran. It's China too, by the way, that's buying all this oil.
Yeah.
Iran is sending millions of barrels a day to China. So, I mean, you want to start connecting all these things. China is funding all of this ultimately, and it leads us to where we are now. Why were we depleting the Strategic Petroleum Reserve during this whole period too? Like now that we're entering a conflict in the Middle East of all places, it's crazy, David. It's hard for us to even put all the pieces together.
And imagine how this all looks like if Iran has nuclear weapons. then no one can do, then they're threatening everyone. Then no
Yes.
one can think about North Korea. We can't do anything about that situation now. Once we let Iran have nuclear weapons, the whole situation changes, and it becomes, I don't even know what it becomes. It's going to be devastating for a lot of people, because you're not going to be able. Their proxies will be able to do whatever they want under the umbrella of their protection, and it's going to be a disaster for the world.
Meanwhile, here domestically, it seems like Democrats are in a bit of chaos right now about how to respond to this. I don't know why. I mean, the obvious answer to this is to condemn what Hamas did this weekend. But why is it that Democrats have such a difficult time admitting the obvious?
Well, there's a wing within the Democratic Party, the progressive wing, that is pro-Hamas. There's no other way really to look at it. I mean, people who call for ceasefires before Israel has even taken back towns that have been taken by terrorists who are massacring the elderly and raping women are pro-Hamas. And the problem is they don't want to offend that faction. At least some Democrats don't. I mean, these Democrats, like if you say something bad about George Soros, they have a meltdown over how it's a dog whistle for anti-Semitism, but they can't say a word about AOC or Omar or any of these people with these. Yeah. So
yeah.
That's just the reality right now.
It is. It's a demented ideology where they're telling everybody it's Indigenous Peoples Day. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, unless you're a Jew in Israel. Then apparently not in that case. It's nuts. Well, David Harsanyi, thank you as always for your analysis, sir. People can read you over at the Federalist, and we're grateful for your time today. Thank you very much.